You are listening to Survival Stories with Jacqui. Welcome, survival warriors. If you are a victim or survivor of trauma, then you're in the right place. In this show, we'll explore the extreme strength displayed by victims of trauma as they journey through life to the survival pinnacle. My name is Jacqui, and I am so grateful to be here today to share my survival with you. Here is this survival story. Let's dig deep.
Well, hello, survival warriors, and welcome again to another episode. Today, I want to take us back over season 1 and the best bits that have come out of it, because I think if there was ever a learning point for any of us this season, it's been that trauma doesn't have to be a negative change in our lives. Sometimes when we go through trauma and we find a way through, it can be quite positive, and it can lead to so much happiness, as we've seen with many of our guests. We've had recovery from drug addiction, we've had child abuse, we've had incest, we've had miscarriage, all awful things to happen to anybody. But at the end of the day, we've had people who saw the light and found their way back, found their way from the darkness to the light. Just think about that for a minute. Isn't that the desire of all of us? I would have thought so. So please sit tight, watch carefully as I bring you some of the best bits of season 1 survival stories with Jacqui.
So there are really two of those. There are really two moments that were, and even the moment that I alluded to where my best friend was stabbed in front of me. You might say that was one. All it did was push me to leave the city I lived in, which was incredibly dangerous, just an incredibly violent city. And it didn't really matter what race you were. You know, it was an incredibly racial city too, actually. But the really big ones, the ones that were like complete illusion, disintegrating experiences where you just are like, I don't know what's on the other side of this, but I'm not doing this anymore. The first one was, I had been an active drug addict and alcoholic and criminal and, general ne'er-do-well for leading up to this moment for basically my entire life. I mean, so I had moved from watching my friend get stabbed. I left the city that I lived in all of my developmental years, which was so violent. And I moved to a city that it was actually really not violent. It was a college party town in California. Big shout out to Chico. You know who you are. But I found the dark side of it. I found the underbelly of it because that's what I brought in with me. And proceeded to go deeper into methamphetamines, deeper into, just the kind of drinking that made everyone uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. The level of drinking that made my drinking buddies uncomfortable.
Yeah.
The level of methamphetamine use that made my drug using buddies uncomfortable.
Wow.
I mean, looking back, I can say I know what I was doing in hindsight, and I was trying to get right down to that me and the devil toe to toe. And only one of us walks out of here alive.
Yeah.
I know that's really what it was like win, lose, or draw. We're fine. So the moment was I had been homeless for a while. I had gotten incarcerated, just gotten out of jail. I was dealing drugs. And so I had a lot of friends with a quotation mark around it. And while I was in jail, I didn't know this had happened, but for some reason, so Butte County in California at that time was in what they felt was a crisis with methamphetamines. And I think they were looking for PR because, and you can't make this stuff up. When I got out of jail, one of my best friends showed me a newspaper that had come out while I was in jail. And the headline with the article, I guess, said that they had arrested this important kingpin figure in the drug world. And it was me.
Oh my God.
And I couldn't, but here's the thing. I could not have been farther from that. I was a nickel and dime dealer. And so, but the thing is everybody in my world saw that. And so when I was released from jail 3 weeks later or whatever it was, everyone assumed that I had cut a deal. And so all of my other nickel and dime friends, you know, they're like, every time I go and try to talk to someone, they need to check me for a wire, as if any of us were that important. It was really, really crazy. Yeah. And, you know, with the benefit of 25 years hindsight, I realized I could take a huge civil case against them for doing that. But that's neither here nor there. I get out of jail and nobody will talk to me. And I don't know why, because I don't know that this had happened. Right?
My goodness. That's amazing.
So I go around to one friend's house who had been holding on to some of my stuff for me. And I try to talk to them and get a shower, and they close the door on me and they're terrified. I go to another friend's house. It's the same kind of thing. 2 or 3 people like this. And I was able to go get a couple of my really big country boy friends, and we literally kicked somebody's door in. And so we kicked the door in, and I walked in, and I'm like, I'm getting answers. What's going on?
I went to babysit for another one of my mother's friends, and it was her birthday, and they were going out. So my mother convinced me that it would be a nice thing to do. So when in a way to get some extra money. So when I went, everything started out fine. They went out, but when they came back, she came back. She was singing, and I knew she was drunk. She went upstairs to her room, but her husband came down and sat in the television room, and I kind of knew something was wrong because the hairs on the back of my head began to stand up. And you know, when you just feel uneasy, you know something's not right. So I lay there, and I was completely dressed. I wasn't wearing shorts or a half top or my underwear and bra. I had a full t-shirt on. I had a pair of shorts on that came to the middle of my calf, so everything was hidden. And so, but I knew something was wrong. So I was laying on the couch, and he was sitting in the recliner, and I turned my back to him, not to speak to him, not to say anything to him. And eventually I did drift off to sleep. But when I woke up feeling a breeze running across my chest and really not understanding it. So when I began to open my eyes, I realized that I had no clothes on, and I couldn't get up to get them because I could see my clothes sitting on the floor next to me, but I couldn't get them. And I realized slowly as I woke up that there was something straddled across me. I could feel his legs against my hips. And the more I woke up, the first thing I can remember is him taking money out of his pocket and ramming it in my mouth.
Oh my
and
gosh.
telling me not to say a word or this will be the last thing I ever tasted. And as I lay there with tears running down my eyes again, I had developed a neurological disorder from all of the abuse when I was 6 to 8. And that neurological disorder kicked back in. I hadn't felt it since we moved away. But what it does is it numbs my entire, anytime I get overly stressed, it would numb my entire body. And I literally would lose physical control. And I know it was psychological, but I think that was my body's way of trying to protect me because I also couldn't feel anything. So when he was finished, he got up, went upstairs, and as my body came back to me, I could feel the pain. So it was not just a sexual assault, it was a very violent sexual assault.
From a very cruel.
Yes.
Oh my God. I can't even describe the words that are going through me right now. Some people get annoyed by that term. Just let it go. It's not that easy though. You know, people think it's you know, you're annoyed. People often think you're annoyed. Just let it go and it'll be fine, right? But it's not that easy.
It is not that easy. And for me, letting go was just finally opening up about it. Because like a lot of the things, some people knew that my father had gone to prison, but like my mother being abusive, nobody knew that.
Okay.
So it was like this, you know, this deep hidden secret that had obviously affected me, but no one knew about. And so I knew that it probably would be beneficial for me to kind of let it out, but I felt like I couldn't, you know, I didn't want to, like speak ill of my mom because I still love her very much. She's my mom. But when I was able to seek therapy and open up to somebody that wasn't connected to my mom, I was able to open up about it and to really be honest with my feelings around like my dad leaving the home. I was very resentful. We were very close. And after he came home from prison, I was very resentful towards him because, you know, my mom was the abusive one and my father was always the loving, gentle, kind one. And so he balanced out when she was never abusive in front of him. So if he was like at work or something, you know, and if we were sick as children, my mom would yell at us. Like it was an inconvenience to her. And my dad would come in and she was a stay-at-home mom. You know, he's the one that had to get up at 5, 6 in the morning to go to work, but he would stay up all night with us to, you know, make sure that we were okay, or, you know, if I had an earache or something.
Sure.
So I realized the resentment came from feeling obviously abandoned, but like he was the person that made us feel safe and feel loved. And now here we were alone with my mom, who's under a tremendous amount of stress becoming a single parent. So letting go comes with some work. So I had to look at you know, what were their stories, both my parents.
Okay.
And my mom came from an alcoholic, she had an alcoholic father, and there was abuse in her home. And so when I started to look at what my parents had been through, it was a little bit easier for me to be empathetic and not so hateful at times. You know, I definitely felt very bitter and hateful towards particularly my mother. And when I was able to look at it from a different perspective, I was able to forgive her because, you know, here I was doing the work I needed to heal, but she never had that opportunity. I don't think she knew how. So that really allowed me to kind of have some empathy for her and look at things from a different perspective. She wasn't, she didn't want to be that way. That's how she coped. And so it definitely changed how I looked at things, and it allowed me to forgive. And it wasn't easy. It was a process.
Yeah, that's a really important point to make, because like I said, some people think, let it go. Okay, I've let it go. No.
No, no, it takes time. It takes time. But I'd rather do that than to sit with that bitterness, because when you're not able to forgive, it affects you more than it affects that other person. I mean, it may not affect that person at all, because they don't even know that you have that issue. Mm-hmm. So it was eating me more than or I don't know if she has kind of her own demons to work through or not. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But I know for me, carrying that around was not fair to myself. And so I had to release it. Even if it was hard to do, I had to do it.
I believed to my core that it was the right thing to do. And I got there, and I said earlier that it comes back to a train. And I sat there looking at the tracks and knowing that a train was coming. I'd looked up the schedules. I knew when trains were coming. And a train started coming. And I discovered something about myself that surprised me. To that point in my life, every single time I'd ever hit something that I felt was a responsibility, that was a duty, that was my obligation, I had stepped up and done it. Period. Full stop. Never had missed it. Not that I'd never missed a task or turning in a paper, but something that mattered, I had never, ever missed. And as I got ready to take my final steps, if you will, I couldn't do it. I tried. And I looked, man, I was so mad. I was mad for days after. I was mad for weeks after, because I felt like I'd failed my family. I felt like I had failed the world because I didn't fulfill the one big responsibility that I had in front of me.
All right, Dan, let's take a break now.
When I first started coming into this, I knew where I was going, but from here to here was just like a big empty sort of path. And Dan has sort of filled in like, well, if you want to get there, let's go ahead and trace the steps.
I feel like at the end of the day, I get a lot more done. Just the organizational skills that he brings to the table is amazing.
I found that Dan very much met me where I was at.
If you want to see growth, strategic thinking is the way to do it. We went from that garage to a 14,000 square foot facility. Last year we did 1 million in revenue. The single thing, if I had to pick out one thing, was that talk with Dan.
I could work with someone that actually knows how this works and is willing to take the time and energy to apply it to my field and teach it to me and tailor it to what I do.
If you don't have a mentor right now that you look to for your business, I think Dan is the perfect one for my business. He's been amazing.
Okay, Dan, that is such a powerful story that you have there, and I'd like to thank you again for sharing it. But what I want to know is, how did you take yourself out of that anger and frustration you felt over the next few days, and what happened next? You know, what happened next to take you to the Dan we all know and love today?
I appreciate the know and love part. I don't know if I'll accept the all, but we'll go from there. As I look back to that day, I think that when I put the chip back on my phone, I felt an immense amount of shame. And it's interesting because I found this in others who haven't in their mind, succeeded in their attempt. In fact, I think they succeeded in surviving. And that's how I would claim it now. But on that day, I felt shame at having failed. I felt shame at not having done it. And then when I put the chip back in my phone, I discovered that like half the town had been looking for me, that everybody on my bowling league, that my wife had everybody out looking for me, the police. And I was confused because in my mind, like, why did it matter? Right. And there was a lot of anger directed toward me. This was 12 years ago, I think, or 11 years ago now. So I think there was probably less understanding of what was going on than there may be a little bit in the world today. There was also a connection from others to say, hey, like, this isn't okay. I think it's worth noting that me doing this didn't make anything better in my relationship with my wife. And I say that because sometimes people will do it saying, well, if I do this, it'll just, and then it doesn't happen. Well, now why aren't things all better? It did not. In fact, I think it damaged it further because it felt like a further breach of trust. Like, well, wait a minute, you can't handle like this difficult situation we're in. So you're just throwing your hands up and so it created some frustration there. I was angry with myself. I was ashamed of myself. And for the first few weeks, and especially the first few days, no matter how many times people would say, I'm grateful you're here. I'm happy you're here. I'm glad that you didn't do that. And they meant it. Like they were like, I'm honored by it as I look back. I brushed it off because I was just pissed. I was just really upset. I was really angry at myself because I believed, even in that moment, I believed that it was a right thing to do, but I had faced the fact that even if I believed it was 100% the right thing to do, I could never do it. Because I've never believed something was so right and not been able to do it. And I knew I would never believe that it was that right again. So I knew I couldn't. And so I dealt with all of those emotions, and that was really hard. What I came to understand over weeks and months was that I wasn't seeing a great perspective, was that, hey, this was a reaction at a moment of loss. And it was I don't want to say inappropriate, but it was a poor response to grief. It was a poor response to situations. And that by the time I got maybe a year later, I was able to say the words, I'm glad it didn't work.
Okay, so we're partway through and we've seen quite a few really tragic stories that makes us sit back and think how grateful we are about our lives today. And even with the bad bits, that we have the ability to be able to see a way forward. Sit tight, my friends. Sit tight and watch while I present for you more stories of survival and show you how you can do it too.
I knew, having watched my older brothers and sisters, because I'm one of 8, there's 8 of us, it grow up and move on and do things. I knew that my way out was through education. That the only way that I was going to be able to financially pay for things, to be able to be independent and to be able to move on, was to go to college and move on with my life and be there for me.
Take a break there, please, Nancy.
Hi, this is Jacqui, and you've been listening to one of my friends tell their stories today. I invite my friends to tell their stories to help you heal. If you do have any trauma or any difficulties that you think we could help you with, please visit my website, jacquiandfriends.com, and leave a message or contact me, and I'll be happy to connect you with either today's friend or anyone else who you've listened to or watched who you think might be able to help you further. Or if you just want to talk to me, that's great too.
And we're back again, and Nancy was just telling us how she had decided that education was the way forward. A little bit like me really there, isn't it? Education is the way. It does wonders. Back to you, Nancy.
So education to me and studying was my addiction. A lot of survivors seek other ways of escaping. They may become addicted to drugs. They may become alcoholics. They may perform criminal behavior, all in a sense of trying to find a way and escape and acceptance. For me, I was very fortunate that I was intelligent, but also that my parents believed in education. So when I was studying, my father would leave me alone. And it reinforced that for me, that if I studied, I could, and at the same time, by studying and doing that, I had teachers take notice of me. So in a lot of ways, I became the teacher's pet, but it was a nurturing environment for me. And so not only was it my way out, which I realized, but it was also a place where I felt warmth and accepted, and I was good enough. I could do this.
Safe place.
And yeah, and math in particular for me, because there's logic, there's order. I know people think that's nuts, but in a chaotic world where I had no control, math was a place where I could be grounded, because no matter what, there was always a set of principles, there was always a set of theorems that you could prove. So that to me was comforting. So I put myself through school. I went in a co-op education program. I had a corporate sponsor who college helped me find. I did a 5-year program in 2.5 years. When I came home, because I was working 3 months and going to school for 3 months, and when on my home breaks, my father would still be there. So it was still continuing. And it actually continued. I got married when I was 21 to the only boy I had ever dated. And I had just finished school, and we ended up having 2 children together when I was 24 and 26. And it was amazing, because he was amazing. He was a stay-at-home parent, even at that age. So my oldest son is now 31, and 31 years ago, men did not stay home with their children. But that's the kind of man that he was, and that's who I was, because I needed that career kind of focus. And I was not I'd never had a role model really in terms of maternal instincts. So my husband taught me how to parent and taught me how to be a family. And those were amazing years. At the same time, this still was occurring up until it was in my mid-20s, but it didn't occur very frequently because we were now 1,000 miles geographically separated. But it was something I could not, no matter what I was a manager, I was educated, I could not, I just had no ability to stand up to my father. And so there was parallel lives is the way I would describe it. I was 28 years old. Very much, it had stopped for a few years. I was protecting my children by not allowing them access to him without supervision.
Right.
And I had a husband who adored me. And 28 years old, my father died. Then the night before he died, he was going in for open heart surgery again. The chances of him living were slim, and so there was an expectation that he might die the next day. And on the phone that night, he called and he actually said to me, "I'm sorry, please forgive me."
I packed up everything and got in my car, took my cat, and we went to Minnesota. And so that was the beginning of kind of part of a dark journey for me, because I just felt like I got totally displaced. First my dad passes, then I go through a divorce, and now on top of it all, I get exposed to black mold, and I happen to be one of those people that are genetically sensitive to it. So I was asking questions like, what else can go wrong, right?
Yeah.
Which I know now is not a good question to ask. You don't want to ask those questions. I learned about asking, positive affirmations. Noah St. John actually wrote a book about that called Affirmations, where you ask the opposite, like, how can it get any better than this? Or, why are good things happening to me? But at the time when you're in pain, it's a natural pain question to ask. You just feel like the world is clamping down on you. And
Yeah.
what else can go wrong? You know, and then, you know, and then the universe will show you what else can go wrong.
Yeah, it says, oh, have you had this yet? Yeah.
For some, you know, so that's how I started to begin an awareness of when you get into that place where negative things are happening and you ask those questions, then look out, because something else negative can come right around the corner. And I thought it was the universe punishing me. I thought somehow all these experiences were happening. I certainly didn't have control of my dad passing away. You know, that wasn't something that was, I thought it was in my control, and I probably was punishing myself internally, but the truth is that's something that was not in my control. I wanted it to be, but it wasn't. The divorce, you know, it takes two people, and when two people are going through trauma patterns, I've told my kids this. You know, I had a conversation with one of my youngest, and I said, listen, you know, it's not mom's fault or dad's fault that there was a divorce. You know, two people that can't handle their trauma patterns and they don't know how, then it doesn't lead them to a healthy place where they could have healthy relating. And so it's not that anybody's to blame, other than we just didn't know, and we're still learning. And I said that, and I said, we're still learning. And if more parents who are going through divorce would talk to their kids like that, I think we'd have a lot better situation. But instead, what happens is one parent gets really fearful that the other one's going to take the children away. And so then they start pitting each other against each other. But if there could be more education out there about what to say to children, and this is what I learned from my own trauma patterns, if we could just be vulnerable and say, we're going through trauma and we don't know how to resolve this. We don't have the skills. Just like you teach people all the time different skills, you're their tutor. Who tutors us on relationships?
Yeah, it's one of those, excuse me, one of those things that is often missing in the school curriculum, teaching kids life skills, like how to handle relationships, how to handle trauma. With that missing, it does cause a great big gap in life and can lead to situations that are quite hard to handle. It can affect a whole life. Absolutely, I agree.
And I think, you know, it's a great point that you make when I think about what they could talk about. And by the way, there's an author there's a therapist that I love. He's a coach now, Jason Gaddis. I'll give him a shout out here because he has a relationship school. And one of the things he talks about is they don't teach, just like you said, they don't teach relationships in school. And so his mission is to help people learn about relationships. And eventually he does want to go into schools and teach about relationships. But one of the things I really think that they could teach is just to make some general conceptual awareness, like I'm saying here, is you don't have to give kids all the skills. You just have to say to them, look, if any of you here have gone through anything, you know, where parents get divorced or whatever, or, you know, these things happen, it's usually because people have different trauma patterns or things that they were unable to resolve. And so rather than, you know, looking at it like somebody's to blame, look at it as like they have it's like mental health awareness. They had some issues that they hadn't learned how to deal with because nobody teaches about it.
Because maybe I wasn't ready to release her. You know, when I finally went to do the work a few years later, I went to the center of the man who developed this work in Sedona, Arizona, and I actually met my daughter as I went through an unwinding and released her. I was finally ready to release her spirit from my body, and it was the most incredible day of my life.
I can imagine. Incredible, happy, ecstatic, all those feelings. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, the amount of tears that came out of this one body through that process was just so amazing and so beautiful. And it was, you know, that was probably one of the first steps towards some major healing for me, even though it was like gut-wrenchingly painful to meet her in the spirit world, and as I'm moving through this vision, and not have her physically with me. So it took me a lot of years of work, of some deep work, in order to accept that she's the daughter and I'm the mother, and I was left here to make some really powerful impact on many people's lives because of the experience that we chose to go through together.
Sure. That experience, when you just want to experience it,
Mm-hmm. I want everyone to experience it. But here's the thing. We have such a fear culture. We have a culture that really puts so many constraints on us and just strips us of our divinity from little on. We're just constantly being stripped of our magic and our intuitive wisdom, that it can be hard to access. It can take quite a while for someone to really learn to take those breaks off. We can be in a controlled holding body throughout most of our lives because we're stressed. We have to pay our bills. We have to have this job. We have to get the health care,
That's it. Society sort of takes over a lot of us, and it stops us actually being able to take ourselves to that realm, because we get that fear of what will other people think if they knew, or things like.
Or what happens if we lose control? We learn to be so controlled in this life. And when we actually lose control, we gain that divinity. We gain that soul, that beautiful soul experience that we really can have in these human bodies. It's so beautiful, that enlightenment, that frequency, that vibration, however you want to call it. It's a connection to God, source, spirit, if that's what you believe. And it becomes very deep. It's a type of faith and beauty that I would be lost without it in my life. I don't know that I would have made it through that grief and that devastation. I don't know that my body would have made it back to health without the work that I have done.
But I would say to our listeners, though, it's really important that you think about what Laurie is saying, because I can also testify that a lot of my healing came from building faith and my spirituality, and I worked hard on connecting and building my vibration level to be able to get through everything. And today I feel much better for it, but I never stopped working on it and I never stopped believing in it. Sorry, Laurie, I'm interrupting. Please continue.
Oh, I absolutely agree, because the thing is, we're constantly being bombarded with our media, with messages, with fear, with, scarcity mentality. So you cannot stop. You have to keep going.
It was like defeating an old enemy that had plagued me throughout my life. I've been made fun of. I've been called stupid my entire life by a lot of people. And so finishing a doctorate in education really, really gave me redemption and validation, I guess.
Surely no one could call you stupid, because that's the last thing I could think that you could be. If anything, there should be more like you. How does it make you feel? And because as an entrepreneur, we're faced with the constant doubting Nancy's, negative Nancy's all over the place. You sort of come across with, oh, I prefer to just have a job, then I know what's going to happen at the end of the month.
Yeah, it's entrepreneurship is it's a way for creatives to kind of beat the system. And some people do need the stability of a job until their venture takes off. My time in corporate was good. I became a technical writer for about a decade, and it helped me to build stability. But just the entrepreneur bug gets in your head, and for some people, it's just too strong to give up. And so I've been on my own for about 4 years without a boss. Some months are good, some months are bad, but it's been a steady climb. It's been an ascension, which is great. But it's not a fast path for a lot of people, and people need to be honest about their aspirations and what their goals are.
Can I just ask you, because I've always found it difficult to have a manager who takes things life at a different pace to me. Did you find that when you were in corporate for 10 years? You know, a manager who says, right, tick this box and then come back to me so that I can check that you've ticked those boxes, and then I'll tell you what to do.
Yeah, I've had both good bosses and bad bosses. My last two jobs, I was very fortunate. I had bosses that were flexible. They were open-minded, and they gave me enough creative freedom where they didn't have to lean over my shoulder, and just let me work and left me alone. And that was a good arrangement. But I've also had bosses that were severely self-hating, had lives that they couldn't stand. And in my own mind, I never wanted to be like them.
Yeah, the micro managers are.
Yeah. There's a lot of management styles out there, and I've learned a lot. There's a Navy SEAL named Jocko Willink, and his management books are excellent, because one key point was he talked about the difference between completely leaving people alone versus micromanaging to the nth degree, and the flaws with both of those systems. You want to be somewhere in the middle where you give direction, expectation, you give the resources and tools that they need, and then you assess the finished product. But you leave them alone. So
starting a conversation about the progress on the product always works better, because you can't get away from the fact that people need development.
Yeah.
Could I just ask you, because you haven't actually touched on this yet? You're a vet as well, haven't you?
I'm 20-year veteran in the Air Force, so I'm still a reservist. I literally just did the last 4 days. I did reserve duty from my home, so yeah, I'm still in.
Sorry, coming from the UK, I don't understand. What does that involve?
Okay. So reservist means part-time. And so it means 1 weekend a month, before COVID and everything, 1 weekend a month, I'll drive up to my base. And then for me personally, we're assigned to Korea. This sounds very odd. We're assigned to Korea. So once a year, we would actually fly to Korea and do war games over there. Okay. And so we do 2 weeks over there. When you hear the phrase annual tour, something like that, that's what that means. And when I was active duty means full-time. You have a job and you just work on that job. And so I was in Louisiana fixing bombers. And so I feel like military service, and that's where I joined at 21, and that's where I really had structure and food and discipline for the first time. And I think that's what straightened me out.
And that is what we call a successful season. This season has brought to us many ups and downs, many stories with twists and turns, and all of the stories have ended up in a positive place with people who are willing to be there to help you to survive your story. Now, season 2 has a lot more available to you, a lot more help, a lot more people, and many, many powerful stories like we've seen before. So please please share, please invite your friends, because we never know when something might happen, and we need to know where to get the help that we need. See you next episode. And there we have it, another empowering episode of Survival Stories. If you heard something today that resonated with you, please reach out at jacquiandfriends.com and download our free PDF. Don't forget to head over to iTunes and leave a 5-star review and rating. And whilst you're online, why not join our community of warriors on Facebook at Survival with Jacqui. Look forward to seeing you there.